Hello, and welcome to our latest episode of This Day and Age. In this episode, we'll welcome Carl Paganelli, who's here to share how he and his family were fortunate enough to experience the full spectrum of care that hospice offers. After Carl's wife, Kathy, peacefully passed away under the care of Faith Hospice, Carl and his children sought the help of their bereavement services, and Carl's story, which we will hear in this episode, highlights not only the compassionate care that Faith Hospice provides, that's a part of what they do for their patients, but also their final days and continued support for families during and after the loss. I'm grateful that we will have this personal perspective and powerful story of hospice care and how it extends beyond the end-of-life phase. Very important things from our guest, Carl Paganelli. Carl, I am so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us on this episode of This Day and Age.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
Could you talk a little bit about yourself? First of all, we need to know who you are and a little bit about your background and how you and your family came to work with Faith Hospice.
Well, Kathy was my high school sweetheart. We ended up getting married, and I started in federal law enforcement, moved around the United States, came back to Grand Rapids, and was a probation and parole officer. And Kathy and I had two children. One lives in Florida, one lives in Grand Rapids. And Kathy had a family history of cancer. Her dad died at a very young age, and so did her brother from colon cancer. So we were always really preventative in doing all the treatment that she had to do on a yearly basis. Then in 2012, March actually, before we were going on my daughter's senior trip, Kathy was diagnosed with stage 5 cancer.
Talk about that diagnosis. I mean, you mentioned you were trying to be very preventative, very cautious with the family history. Did that come as a shock to you guys?
It really did come as a shock because she did so many preventative measures. It's had certain surgeries that the Lynch syndrome gene is what she is diagnosed with, and her family had. We did these every year, colonoscopy, endoscopy, and we really felt like we're on top of it. And this time when the doctor walked in the room, me being law enforcement officer, I knew right away by the doctor's demeanor that something wasn't right. And he said he found something, and I just point blankly said, "What do you think?" And he said, "I think it's cancer." And that's really when our world turned into, a whole preventative and try to figure out what you do now. 2 weeks later, we took a trip to Jamaica on a senior trip.
Talk about the cancer journey, if you would, Carl.
The cancer journey right away, she had a procedure that was very, very difficult. It's called the Whipple. And it just basically takes all kinds of different organs in the small bowel area. And that was successful. Unfortunately, Kathy didn't recover as good as we wanted. So she was in the hospital for the first 90 days after the surgery. She missed her older daughter, graduated from Central Michigan. We eventually got her out of the hospital, and she was able to see my younger daughter graduate from high school. And then it was the procedure where we started the extensive chemotherapy treatment in Grand Rapids, Florida, and also at Northwestern University in Chicago.
And eventually you realized the treatment is just not going to do what was hoped for, and you had to make a tough decision on hospice. Walk us through that process.
Well, from the beginning, Kathy was diagnosed with a 5% chance of survival. And we did a lot of clinical research drugs down in Florida, and back and forth to Grand Rapids was all coordinated with Lemon Holton, a doctor at Northwestern. And we did this for about 4 years, and finally, in June of 2016, the doctor in Florida said, it's time to go home and find hospice. Immediately upon our return to Grand Rapids, Kathy immediately got admitted into the hospital. And at that point, we started kind of talking with different hospice agencies. 2 or 3 of them came, spoke to them, really talked about what it's all about. Had not really any idea what hospice was about, what they do for it. Faith Hospice came in and they opened the conversation by saying a prayer. And my wife was very spiritual. And when Faith Hospice left, she looked at me and she said, this is who I want to care for me and also care for you and the girls after I pass away.
That was exactly where I was going to go with this, which was this is a major decision, even saying and accepting we need to go to the stage of hospice care. But that really was a difference maker when Faith Hospice began that prayer.
Yeah, Phil, you always think that something's going to happen. You're going to turn the corner. You're going to beat this, and you always have that in the back of your mind. You never lose faith and you never lose hope. And Kathy never did. For all the treatment she did and everything she went through, she was so positive, so positive, or never gave up. And was amazing because I couldn't feel like my life was going to change forever. She was the one fighting. And, the hospice really helps you put things together when you finally have to go home and they come and provide services.
So you begin the process of the hospice journey with Faith Hospice. This is a big deal because every journey for every person, Carl, including Kathy's, is different. Can you walk us through that journey and how they communicated with you and your daughters along the way, and just bring us into that process, if you would?
Yeah, after we decided to go with Faith Hospice, Kathy was eventually released from the hospital to go home. At that point, Faith Hospice came in with a social worker, a doctor, and they put a plan together. And right from the beginning, they said, Kathy has probably 13 to 14 days to live. And I was looking at a person who was still very vibrant. Yes, I knew she had cancer. Yes, I knew she was going to die, but I was like, you're crazy. That was like, no way. Well, fast forward, after all the treatment and being there, taking care of Kathy and being there for myself and my family, it just left such a big burden off my shoulders that they came and they bathed her and they made sure the prescriptions were right. The social worker came, followed up. And my first journey really with Janet, who was the bereavement counselor, she walked on in to the first visit and started talking to me and Kathy and said, Kath, I just want you to understand that I am going to be here for you during this process and also going to be there for your family, which was very comforting, which, end of life, Kathy couldn't speak, but they can hear.
Mm. You got the best from Faith Hospice. I know Janet.
Yeah.
She's an amazing person. Janet Jamin is the bereavement director there, and she is incredible. I'm hearing you tell this story, and obviously Kathy is the hospice patient, but hospice care involves the loved one's family, and Faith Hospice took pretty good care of the Paganelli family, huh?
Yeah, when I went into this, I felt like hospice only for the dying. I didn't really think about for the family afterwards, and Janet made it clear that after Kathy passed, that services would be provided to myself, to my daughters, to any of my family members, Kathy's siblings. And to be honest with you, I kind of re-immersed myself back into football officiating, and kind of was floating around, just filling in week to week with crews. And in November of that year, I went to see Janet with my daughter. I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to have Christmas at home. My daughter wanted to do Christmas and bring out all the Christmas ornaments and everything like that. And I said, Jen, I'm thinking about taking the kids on a Caribbean cruise, something different. And Janet looked right at me. She said, I think it's a wonderful idea. My daughter was a little hesitant, and she said, you'll still honor your mom, but if you bring out all the old memorabilia and all the old Christmas stuff, it's going to bring sadness. And it was the best advice that Janet ever gave. We had a wonderful time. Yes, we missed Kathy. Yes, we celebrated Christmas without her, but it was a great positive step moving forward for myself and my daughter.
Carl, I want to talk about the final couple of weeks, and really even as you begin the hospice journey with Faith Hospice. I want to talk about the state of mind for your daughters and for you. I mean, there's a level of acceptance, but you're also grieving what is to come, and that is it's a challenging thing for all of us. We all go through it with loved ones. Can you talk about that? And just, you're the dad. You've got two young daughters, it's an extra layer of stress. Plus, you're
Sure.
working, you're officiating. Talk about that process and just kind of how you made through it. You mentioned the word floating at one point, where you just kind of moving on with life. I guess a lot of us do that, but
Yeah,
dig a little deeper there if you could.
well, what basically bottom line is that I wasn't sure if I was going to go back reffing football. Football didn't have any meaning anymore to me. I just lost my high school sweater, lost my wife. I had 2 daughters, and they were struggling like, Mom's not going to be here for our weddings. Mom's not going to be here for the birth of our children. And to deal with all that and help them try to process everything was difficult for me. Obviously, they had a really close connection with their mom. Her mom's gone now. So all of a sudden now I became the parent that they talked to all the time. And really what helped out a lot was, Faith Hospice set up hospice with my daughter down in Florida. They coordinated all that for me. And they also, my younger daughter was involved. And that journey was really, as best as I could, pretty seamless to try to get them in a place to at least start working on the grieving process.
Mm-hmm. Were there things that stood out in terms of what Faith Hospice did along this journey, both during Kathy's final weeks and afterward?
They were always there for me. It could be 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I had an episode or incident. End of life is not pretty. The body goes through a lot of changes and breakdown, and a lot of things they told me it was going to happen, and sure, man, it did happen. But they were there when I called 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And what do I do now? Use this medicine. You have this medicine. And they were always there during that process. The doctors, the aides, everybody helped in a very difficult time. Not only for me, but my 2 daughters experienced the dying process, which was not something that they really understood how it happens.
Mm-hmm. They're young adults, if you will, and that figuring out life at that stage is tough enough,
Sure.
Let alone to lose their mom. And then afterwards, their bereavement services. You mentioned the cruise around the Christmas time.
Yeah.
But backing up before that, how was Faith Hospice important in terms of grieving Kathy's loss for you and your daughters?
Well, when Janet came in the day that my wife passed, which was it was on a Thursday, and Janet went back and asked how we met, and I said, and Kathy's name, her nickname was Petey, so I said, remember Petey? We met when we were at the pool. She raised her head off the pillow and gave me a kiss, and it was like so touching. And Janet took me out in the living room, and she said, Kathy's probably going to die in the next 4 to 6 hours. And we obviously knew at that point. So we were starting to prepare. We had everything already in place. I mean, Kathy had arranged everything, written her own obituary and everything. So that was the beginning of the process. And then, after you go through, the burial services and all that, you wake up the next day and you go, where's my life now? And to be honest with you, like I said earlier, I just got into officiating. And that was until November, as I said earlier. Janet looked at me and she said, well, how are you doing? I said, I don't really know. I'm caring about my 2 kids. That turned into me basically needing help from Janet. Tough guy like me, football official, parole officer. She had me in tears because nobody really asked me, and I didn't think about me. And that started the process where Janet and I developed a relationship.
Yeah, I'm struck by that because you've got to be the tough guy, both for your daughters, but for everybody around you. I mean, you can't be what your friends and family know as Carl. And that's tough to actually let that face of grief show. And then a lot of times it's just so natural. And I'm sure it felt very natural for you to get back at what you were great at, what you loved, which was officiating NFL games, and it was your life. But it's there in the background. Did your daughters ever ask, Dad, how you doing?
Yeah, they did, because they knew that I was always the tough guy. Didn't like to show my emotions. I didn't really want to show them that I was hurting. I needed help because I had to be the strong support for them. And then once they realized that I was going to hospice and trying to work things out, I think it was kind of sense of comfort, especially for my older daughter who was down in Florida, knew that someone was there that I could talk to.
I love how you pointed out the fact that Janet took the time to actually ask a very direct question, which is, Carl, but how are you doing? And then you received some counseling from her. Can you talk about that process? Did you go into it willingly, or did she have to give you a bit of a gentle push or shove?
No, actually, Janet's fantastic. She breaks down, your life, breaks down, Kathy's life, your kid's life, how it all has changed. Recommended a book, and I am not a reader. I read football rules. That's about as far as my reading is. So she recommended a book that I had read about, you don't move on in life when people say it's time to move on. No, what you do is you move forward in life without lost ones. So a lot of it was just really, how am I feeling? What's the next step? Not from like a relationship standpoint, but next step, in my life with football, officiating with my kids and trying to be there for there. And I had a place in Florida, then in Grand Rapids. So I was trying to juggle it all. And then also Janet was there to really, when I had some tough times where I broke down, because I said, when am I going to really break down grieving? She goes, some do and some don't. Well, it hit. I broke down and I called her, and she immediately called me back and was there for me. And we've obviously have formed a great relationship. Very proud of what I've done with Faith Hospice, and we'll probably talk a little bit about the bereavement center.
Yeah, you've done a lot for Faith Hospice, and don't, spoiler alert, that's coming in this conversation. The first name in Faith Hospice is Faith. Kathy's faith was really, you said that was critical for her. It began with that prayer when Faith Hospice first was in your life. Talk about how faith played a role both before, during, and after Kathy passed away for you and your daughter, especially you. Yeah,
we had really formed a good relationship that Kathy had with a pastor. Before really that it got to the end of life, that obviously we knew that there was difficult challenges. And one of the recommendations was to go see an oncologist, psychologist, which was so helpful because Kathy was concerned about me, the girls. I was concerned about her dying. And through all that, Kathy always kept her faith. My daughter did a little fundraising thing in a little band that said, "Keeping the faith." And Kathy never lost that faith. And the faith was there for me, that I knew that I could move forward in my journey in life, whatever it was going to take me. And that's probably the foundation of really what Faith Hospice is. It is a Christian-based background agency that is not afraid to talk about faith.
Yeah. Can you talk about Faith Hospice in terms of beyond the bereavement process and just the holistic level of care? It's really a special thing that Faith Hospice does, and just talk about that as they walk with you after the journey. You talked about the counseling, just the wisdom, but talk about that holistic care approach, if you could, Carl.
It got me to be a lot more active in hospice, and knowing that it was there for not only myself, my daughters, but also there for other people. And Jan and I continued to see each other during the journey. It wasn't as much because I felt like in place, but I'd always tell her, say, I need to come in for a checkup, and basically just kind of talk where my life was at. And then how a lot of things started was, just meeting Geraldine May, who was kind of worked with Janet and did a lot of, things for fundraising. And just that was part of my giving back and part of me just really helping me move forward.
Yeah, you did some special things, including no small thing, Super Bowl tickets as a fundraiser for Faith Hospice. Why was that so important for you to do, the fundraising part?
Well, they asked me to speak at their annual October meeting. And it's, basically it's somebody's journey, what they've gone through with hospice. So I felt like, what? This would be a good idea to try to raise some additional funds, donate 2 Super Bowl tickets. And we had some other donors that helped out and picked up some hotel rooms. And I think the talk I did that day raised almost $50,000. We sold 500 tickets at $100 a piece, so we came up with $50,000. So that was really the beginning, and it felt like my way of how I can thank Faith Hospice for what they have done for me, and it was super successful, and we did it a second time also.
Carl Paganelli, this is quite a story, and there are people hearing this podcast episode, and let's just be honest for a moment, and we've been honest this whole conversation.
Sure.
Nobody wants to contemplate needing hospice for their wife or for their husband or for a child or for their mom or dad. What kind of wisdom would you have for those who might be thinking they're going to need hospice care, for someone who has cancer right now or some other type of illness that doesn't have a good outcome? Can you advise them on this process and why this was so important for you and why you would say don't hesitate at all?
First of all, I think it's not a sign of weakness that you need to go get help in counseling. It's a different type of counseling. And really what it does is it begins your journey after the death. And it allows you to know there's resources there, that they can help you, help your family, that in every move you take, they're there for you, which was very comforting for me because I knew they had my back. They knew that I called them anytime. They were there for me. And I would encourage people to start the process earlier. We didn't really look into hospice early on when Kathy was sick. You just don't think you're going to need it. And when I thought about it, it's only for the dying, and quickly realized that it's more than the dying, it's for your family. And to me, it just helps immensely to have that resource there, especially in the months after the death.
Kind of in a football analogy, and I know you can appreciate that it's like the 12th man on the field. It's that extra source that was just really, as you look back on it, maybe even invaluable, Carl, for you and your family.
Well, absolutely. It was definitely invaluable. I mean, when I'd work a football game, they called it the swing guy because I wasn't on a crew because I didn't know week to week. I'd sit there and I'd watch the clock. I could not wait till the game to get over with, to get on a plane and get back home. And I'm going, oh, this can't go into overtime. I don't want to miss my plane. I want to get home for my children and be there. And it just really gave me a new perspective of how I really needed to keep my journey going with football. And Janet helped me process, keep doing what I do, keep doing what I love, and was able to juggle everything with Faith Hospice's help to keep things with my children moving in the right direction also.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying that Faith Hospice actually kind of helped form the new normal for you and your daughters.
You know, it really was. At one point, I was thinking of walking away from football. You know, I was very fortunate to have a very successful career, but it didn't mean anything anymore. Football was always something that Kathy and I enjoyed. We took the kids on trips and, did some Super Bowls and things. It didn't have that same meaning anymore. And to be honest with you, even today, it does not have the same meaning that it did when we took family trips and did all that. But Janet helped me realize is that that's what you do. That's what you love. That's part of who you are. Don't give that up. Don't give your goals and dreams up. And, I was very, very fortunate to still be successful at it and still kicking around 26 years later.
26 years.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. And you've got to believe at some point, maybe every time you're on the field or enjoying a football game with your daughters, Kathy's looking at you guys saying, thumbs up, right?
Yeah, I mean, every time, I take the field before the game, I say a prayer and have Kathy look over me and the players and the crew that we have a successful day. Win, lose, or draw, whatever it is, just look over us that we give the best product and everybody's healthy and safe.
I have a feeling Kathy was not a fair weather football fan.
She batted a lot. She batted a lot of stuff. One of my Super Bowls that ran the whole entire day down in Miami. And here in Florida, said, "Oh, that's just one of those rainstorms that comes through and it goes away." Well, not this time. It rained in the morning. It rained all night long, and it was crazy. But yeah, she enjoyed indoor stadiums in any stadium down south like I do now in December and January.
Carl, I really appreciate hearing your story. I know so many people are going to benefit from this story. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with about this process and just about the impact it had on your life and your family?
Well, yeah, the big thing, Phil, is that, through the relationship that I had with Janet and Faith Hospice, we went on a journey to open up a bereavement center with the help of the Van Andel family and with the help of myself with a donation and the fundraising. We opened up the Kathy Paganelli Bereavement Center. I was sitting in the old building on a couch, and people walking in and out, getting coffee and everything. They all knew why I was there. And I said to Janet, I said, you guys need to have a counseling center or something like that. That turned into my one idea. And then Janet came back and said, we took your advice. I go, what advice did I give you guys? So we're going to open up bereavement centers. So that's some space. We did it. It's a beautiful office. It's just more personal. They've got offices there. Janet's there. It's great. And, my advice would be, don't wait till the end. Look at hospice ahead of time, even months before. You can bring in hospice when the living is still doing okay, but the prognosis is not good. They're there for their services. There's a lot to take on by yourself. In Faith Hospice, not only from the counseling bereavement, but from, during the person's end of life, they're there. And all these services I talked about earlier, highly, highly, highly recommend. It's changed my life, and I hope somebody else will understand if they may be going something through what I went through, that people are there to help.
It's an amazing team led by, as you mentioned, Janet, the bereavement counselor. And so great to hear that Kathy Paganelli bereavement counseling, those services are there and there to impact so many families through Faith Hospice. Carl, I so appreciate your telling this story, this powerful story, and I know we've really helped a lot of people. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I mean, my journey, is what I talk about, how I went through it and how I move forward in life and how my daughters move forward in life. I'm down here with my first grandbaby is going to turn 1 here at the end of October. So I came down and checked on them. I got both my younger daughters married. So life does move forward. Yes, it's never going to be the same, but hospice helped me put things in perspective, help my children deal with special things, like I said earlier, without their mom not being around.
We appreciate knowing that, and we know you are on the right path. Thank you so much, Carl. And we want to remind our listeners here in this day and age, if you or someone you know could benefit from hospice or bereavement services, Faith Hospice is here. Carl just talked about that. They're there to provide care for both patients and their families like they did for the Paganelli family. You can find a lot more, including information about the Kathy Paganelli Counseling Center at faithhospicecare.org. Again, that's faithhospicecare.org. And most importantly, we want to encourage you to stay tuned for more episodes of This Day and Age, where we will continue to walk through the many ways that aging impacts our lives and the vital services available to you and me for support every step of the journey. In the meantime, you can check out our past episodes of This Day and Age by heading to thisdayandage.org. That's thisdayandage.org. And until next time, for Faith Hospice and This Day and Age, I'm Phil Tower. Thank you so much for joining us.